Hello, I'm Neil Baglow and welcome to New Art Gallery Podcast. New Art Gallery is a fast-growing online art gallery with a unique approach to bringing artists and art lovers together. Over the next few months we'll be chatting to some of the artist, photographer and crafter members of the New Art Gallery family. Our aim is to hopefully give you an insight into their work, what inspires them and what drives them to become creatives in their field. So do look out for and subscribe to future editions of New Art Gallery Podcast. We'd love you to join us on this exciting journey. And who knows, you may be inspired yourself to add some of our featured artists' work to your home or office. Well, today our guest artist is Gerry Halpin MBE. I think it's fair to say that Gerry is one of the leading North of England based artists, and we're proud to say that Gerry has been a member of New Art Gallery for nearly 2 years and indeed was one of our founding members. Gerry's work has been exhibited at leading London galleries and throughout the UK and is featured in an ever-growing number of private collections. He was appointed MBE in the New Year's Honours List 2009 for services to art and charity. Gerry has also been recognised by his fellow artists, being a past president of Manchester Academy of Fine Arts and winner of the Menina Joy Schwab Memorial Award for Outstanding Artists at the Royal Institute of Oil Painters Open Exhibition 2014. Gerry's work has developed over the years, from studies of the West Pennine Moors to more abstract and unique interpretations of marine imagery and landscape, through to observation of human figures in galleries and mass transit environments. Lately he has returned to his original sources but with a quite different approach to the subject. Today, Gerry is going to talk about his work, his journey as an artist, and what drives and inspires him to create his unique observations on places and people. So, welcome, Gerry.
And welcome to you, Neil. Welcome to my studio.
It's a pleasure to be here, Gerry.
Yes.
Gerry, how did your career as an artist begin? I believe you taught art for a good few years.
I did indeed. I was a sort of late entrant, mature student, I think it's called, to teaching. Oddly enough, I trained as a primary school teacher, but never taught in a primary school. It was straight into a secondary school and teaching children with learning problems. So I taught everything and a bit of art as well. But eventually I went to Rivington, where I was a boy actually at that school, and became art teacher there, and eventually became head of art for 16 years, and at which point I resigned to paint.
Gerry, how would you describe your present style? It's changed a lot over the last few years. Can you outline the main periods for us?
Yeah, it began really with luckily being here in Rivington. Local landscape, I became the local landscape painter, as it were, and I quite enjoyed that. But underneath it all, there was a really strong need to do something that was a bit different to just looking at the world and painting what I could see. And I've always had a kind of intuitive approach to things. And so the work evolved from looking at the landscape to thinking about it and checking up with what I saw, with how I could actually paint it, perhaps in a different way, a way that was personal. And so I dibbled into the landscape and moved the landscape a bit. But of course I've always been interested in all kinds of things visually. And so, as you mentioned earlier on, my work has covered all kinds of subjects, but it's become a little bit more confined in terms of what I do, the subjects that I'm interested in. So the landscape work has shifted towards being more expressive, more interpretive, although I still do local landscapes in that sense, because I'm often commissioned to do particular things. But it's moved towards abstraction, and that was always there. There was always something that said, you know, within me, I want to say something about what I'm looking at more than what it is. So it's to do with eyes, and it's to do with mind.
Gerry, let's talk about what inspires you, what gets your creative energies flowing. Are you a country lad at heart?
I'm an outdoors man at heart, anything that's outdoors really. I'm not a still life painter, I'm not an interiors painter, I much prefer to be outdoors. And in fact part of my work is to be outdoors. I don't paint outdoors, but I do draw outdoors, and it's observation mainly, and it's the response I get, personal response I get to what I'm looking at. So I might be up on the moors in all weathers, because that's lovely and moody. I'm down on the seashore watching the tide come in. Sometimes it's wild and wicked and throws things about, and other times it's very gentle and therapeutic to watch the tide. So I'm an outdoors chap.
Great. Gerry, what would you say is the underlying response you seek to evoke in your work? Or does that change with the subject matter?
What I want to do with my work is to be very personal about it, to be able to express what I feel about what I'm looking at. I don't want to just paint something that people will recognise immediately. And of course that's a problem, because quite clearly not everybody would appreciate what I see and how I paint it. But I don't mind that. Otherwise I'd just be painting for a market, which I don't do. I paint for me. So what's essential to me is being able to respond to what I'm looking at. Sensual response, intuitive response, and being able to make something of it. So it's eye and mind.
Okay. So apropos of that, what inspired you specifically to develop your abstract marine landscape theme? You're well known for these, of course.
Well, I just love the sea. Essentially, that's really all I can say about that. I love being on the shoreline, looking at things. I like the flotsam, the jetsam, all the bits and pieces. I like causeways. I like all the things to do with rock pools, for example. Rock pools are the things that I really like, because you can look in them. And it is almost like an aerial view, which is something I used to paint. I used to like the aerial views when we were travelling about and so on. But COVID got rid of that. We couldn't fly anywhere, so I couldn't look down on the world. But interestingly, with a rock pool, from head height, I'm still looking down. So that really was very interesting. And the movement of things within a rock pool, as the tide comes in, it pushes, it raises things up, it drops things down, and the tide goes out, and all of that then changes. So it's quite exciting to look at. And that I draw, of course. I don't paint it there, because I like to have time to look back at the drawings and then think about it and then start to work. And if you're interested to see any of the drawings, would you like to see some of the drawings?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let me show you a sketchbook. This is one of the sketchbooks. This is the other one. Yeah, these are the kind of. This is the drawing, Neil. This is how it starts.
I see.
Just look.
Gerry, so Technically speaking, what mediums do you use, and how do you arrive at the particular combinations we see in your past and present work?
Well, I began as a watercolourist. It was a traditional medium to deal with the landscape around me that I was commissioned to do, and how I began the work, which was to do local landscapes, Rivington, Horwich and district, painting people's houses from time to time, which is always lovely. I always quite like that. It brings me back to a sort of reality, you know, which I like doing. But then I moved on from that into acrylics. I found that acrylics were quite wonderful because I could paint on top of and on top of and on top of, and some of the underpainting would come through if I wanted it to. Sometimes it came through on its own, but it all added up to the notion of being able to be a bit abstract. I could play around a little bit with it. I can push it about, and of course colour mixing. With watercolour, it's a fluid medium, and the fluidity of it is part and parcel of the end product. With acrylics, it's a thicker medium, bang it on, push it around, very exciting to work with. But then I began to respond to the fact that we couldn't fly, couldn't go out anywhere particularly because of the COVID. So I got back onto the moors again, and because we walked, of course, and had to carry on walking. And I began to look at the landscape in a different sort of way. I didn't want to say this is that, or that's that position, or that's that place. It was a response to, well, let me say, old gate posts, broken walls, bare trees, telegraph poles, all that kind of combination. That was really quite fascinating. And in order to deal with that, I began to use ink. So I went back to a fluid medium. But the inks are very intense, they're very lovely to drop in. So it was exciting to do this. It didn't all work. You drop a colour into the wet paper that's been wetted in a particular place, and the ink goes. So the ink brings something back to you. It adds something to the work that perhaps you never expected. So I used inks. I've occasionally used oils, but it's the drying time which is too slow for me. I'm very impatient. Very impatient. I've got to get on. As you can see in this room, it's just full of work. I just keep on going. Yeah. So essentially my three main ingredients are watercolours, which I still do, especially commissions from the local area, and then acrylics, and then inks, which are the latest exciting thing.
Okay. Gerry, on a more mundane note, do you paint every day, and for how long at a stretch? Are you a morning or afternoon person? It may seem, as I say, a mundane question, but I always think a lot of people who are not artists often wonder about the working life of an artist.
Oh yes, they have a sort of magical idea that it sort of happens and you drift through life and just have a paint. Well, I've got to say that I'm very lucky to do it. I'm really, really privileged to be able to be a professional artist and to indulge in painting. But I do have hours because I think it's important. So I get in the studio, it varies, sometimes about 8:30 in the morning, and then I try to leave about 5:45 to be home for 6 o'clock. So it's a working day, but I do 4 days a week in the studio, I have the weekend off, and 1 day a week I always go out drawing, walking, looking at things, and underneath all of that you never switch off. Always looking at things, always thinking, yeah, that colour, that relationship, that telegraph pole in that position. So we never switch off.
Gerry, you've kindly chosen to talk about some of your work and what inspired you and what brought you to this particular subject matter. Can you give us an enlightenment of some of the work here?
Yeah, I'd like you to have a look at these paintings in particular, because these really embody the kind of abstraction that I get from looking at the shoreline, rock pools and so on.
Right.
Sometimes people would look at them and perhaps wonder what the heck they are in a sense, but once you begin to understand what they are from a little explanation, it becomes quite clear. For example, if we're looking at the one at the top, what I'm trying to achieve with that is that sort of gentle inflow of the tide coming into rock pools,
I see.
and it gently swirls around, and sometimes the rocks and things like that will show up and eventually they'll be covered by the tide. So I wanted to really put the gentleness of the flow of the tide into the painting,
I see.
which I hope when people look at it, and possibly somebody might own it, that they'll be able to feel that kind of sense of relaxation. So it's not quite therapy through art, but it's an interpretation of what I saw and indeed what I felt about it. So I would sketch it as we've seen, and then I would paint it. And the colour's quite important because it's really to do with the reflection again of a certain sort of reality, but I'm not tied down to that. You know, I don't want little spottly waves and things like that.
No.
I want an overview of it. This one, for instance, it's busier because there's lots of things going on around and about the rock pools. And we've got this sort of flotsam of things. We've got fishing lines sometimes that drift in. We've got the sense of shells and also bits and pieces that really, it doesn't matter what they are, they're there, and they actually help towards the composition of the whole painting. Because we have to remember it's to do with an original painting, an original thought. It's not a copy of something I've seen. What I've seen is the inspiration to get on and try to reflect that, and that's how that would be. And again, if we look at this one, a larger piece of work, that was so exciting to do. There's so much colour in that. It's a dark painting in some respects, but there are so many lovely, lovely bits and pieces in there of different colours. We've got the purples, we've got the turquoise, we've got little dabs of the white shells that there are down there. And all through it, we've got this gentle swirl and movement within the painting. So that's a reflection again of not only what I've seen, but what I've felt about what I've seen, and then I'm giving that back to those people who can perhaps understand it and enjoy it as much as I enjoyed painting it. So those are essentially the kind of works that I'm very busy with and excited to do.
That's fascinating. Thank you for that, Gerry. Just as a final question, Gerry, how do you feel New Art Gallery has helped more people be aware of it and appreciate your work?
Oh, a great deal. They're smashing in the sense that they're promoting my work, and really artists need that kind of thing.
Right.
As you can see, I work merrily away in this room. I exhibit work in various galleries, and being a member of Manchester Academy, we do have exhibitions throughout the year or years. But with New Art Gallery, my work is there online for people to see at any point in time. So they've been very, very, very useful and very instrumental in publicising my work.
Thank you so much, Gerry Halpin MBE, for talking to us and sharing those great insights into your work.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming up, Neil. Lovely.
If you'd like to see more of Gerry Halpin's work, please go to newartgallery.co.uk and navigate to the members page. Gerry's work is available to buy as original paintings or limited and open edition prints.